Hello students, welcome to the Edupedia World videos. Today we are going to start with the important topic of biology, that is the plant tissues. In the previous classes we have studied about what is a cell. A cell is a structural and functional unit of life. But this cell cannot work on its own. So similar type of cells group together to form a structure which is known as a tissue. Now these tissues are also found in all the living organisms like the cell. So, which are the living organisms on the earth? They are the plants as well as the animals. So both of these organisms like the plants and the animals are made up of tissues. Today we are going to start with the plant tissues. Before proceeding further, let us start with the definition of tissues. A group of cells having a common origin and similar or related structure which work together to perform a common function is called a tissue. Now that's a big definition. See, a group of cells which have originated from the same mother cell and they have more or less similar or related structures. They work together to perform a common function like which we are going to study in the future slides about the xylem. Now xylem is made up of a complex type of tissues, but the function of all the parts of xylem is the conduction of water. Now some important discoveries related to tissues which can be important for your competitive exams. The term tissue was given by Bichette. The study of tissues is known as histology. The term histology was given by Mayer. Now here, Bujo is asking a simple question from you. Bujo says, if a single cell like amoeba can perform all the functions of life, what is the need of the tissues? My students, can you answer this question? Let us take an example. If you are a person who earns the bread for the family, you only have to cook for the family, you only have to study, you only have to play. Will you be able to do all these works very nicely? No. But in our family, our mother cooks the food, our father earns the bread, and you have the work to study. Now, if each and every person is doing his or her work, they are more efficient in doing their work. But if we put all the work on one person, the person will be able to do that work, no doubt, but it will not be so efficient work done. Similarly, the nature has given the justice. The cells combine together according to a criteria, and they divide the labor in different parts. That is where we have the need of tissues. So, let us see what are the importance of the tissues. First of all, the division of labor, as I have told you. Secondly, the tissues become organized to form an organ, and the organs form the organ system. This is the level of organization. And what does the organ system combine to form? Yes, an individual. The workload of individual cells decreases, and if the workload decreases, what will happen? The efficiency of the cells will increase. And this will increase the chances of survival. This is the main point. An amoeba will not survive as much as a human being. Now, as I told you before, that the living organisms, whether it be the plants or the animals, are made up of tissues. Now, a simple question which arises is, are the plants and animal tissues similar? No. The plants and animal tissues are not similar because of the differences in mobility. That is, see, when you feel cold, when you feel hot, when rain is coming, you can protect yourself. But what about the plants? Are they able to protect themselves? No, they have to survive in the harsh conditions. They cannot move. So, if they cannot move, they have to have a structure which protects them. So, mobility is the main point which demarcates the type of tissues of the plants as well as the animals. Second is growth. We have a limited growth as human beings, or animals have a limited growth. But a plant can be very tall. Some of the plants are so high that we cannot even imagine of, and they are continuously growing throughout their life. Next is the structural organization. Of course, we are very much different from the structural organization of the plant. So, now let us discuss the main differences in the plants and the animal tissues. First, abundance. The plant tissues are more dead tissues. They are just there to give the support. But the animal tissues are more living tissues. They are there living and they are performing certain functions. Second is the maintenance energy. Less maintenance energy is required in case of plant tissues because they are mostly dead. They are not as complex. But in case of animal tissues, they need more and more maintenance energy. Next is the meristematic tissues. Now, due to this type of tissues, the plants can continue to grow throughout their life. But as animals, we do not have this type of meristematic tissues. That is why we stop growing after a particular period. Regarding the organization, the plant tissues are very simple, but the animal tissues are a little bit complex in their organization. Now, let's start with the plant tissues. Basically, all the plant tissues have been divided into two categories, the meristematic tissues and the permanent tissues. The meristematic tissues have this characteristic feature of growing continuously. But once they mature and have a particular function, they only form the permanent tissues. So as such, they are not different tissues, but the meristematic tissues are the early tissues which later on form the permanent tissues. So let's first start with the meristematic tissues. Now, based upon the position, the meristematic tissues can be of three types. First is the apical meristematic tissues, second are the intercalary meristematic tissues, and the third one are the lateral meristematic tissues. Let us discuss briefly about each of the type of meristematic tissues. First, we start with the apical meristematic tissues. It occurs on the growing tip of the stems and roots. Secondly, depending upon its occurrence at the root or the stem tip, it is known as the root apical meristem or the shoot apical meristem. So the meristem will be present on the roots also and on the shoots also, and it will help in the growth of both the roots also and shoots also. It is responsible for the growth in the length of the roots and stem. So apical meristem is basically responsible for the increase of the length. Next comes the intercalary meristems. This occurs at the intermediate position at the base of the leaf, where the leaf is attached at the base of that. They are also present at the base of the internodes. Now, what do you mean by a node or an internode? Node is the position from where the leaves arise, and the gap between the two nodes is known as an internode. Next, it helps in the growth of the leaves and the internodes. So, intercalary is basically related to the growth of the leaves and the internodes. And the last meristem is the lateral meristem. Now, as we have seen in the figure, which was showing the position of the various meristems, the lateral meristems occurs on the sides of both the stems and the roots. The lateral meristem can be of two types, the vascular cambium and the cork cambium. This vascular cambium produces the vascular tissues. Now, which are the vascular tissues? They are the phloem and the xylem. What are these tissues? What is their function? We are going to discuss later. Next is the cork cambium. Cork cambium, it produces the protective cork outside the lateral meristem. It increases the girth of the stem. Now what is the girth of the stem? It is the broadness of the stem. So see, basically apical is related to the increase of the length and lateral is responsible for the increase of the broadness of the stem and the root. Now, for understanding the functions of the apical meristem, you can perform a single activity. It's a very simple activity in which two onions are taken. Place them on a jar containing water and let them grow for 1 or 2 days. Maximum on the third or fourth day, you are going to see that the roots are coming out. Now, of one onion, you cut the root tips. Now, it will be seen that the roots of bulb 1 or the onion bulb 1 continue to grow after the fourth or fifth day. But the roots of bulb 2 will stop growing. The difference between the two jars is that the bulb 1 has the root apical meristem which are quite intact. But in case of bulb 2, what has happened? Yes, you have cut the root apical meristem. So, the conclusion will be that the apical meristem is responsible for the growth in the length of the root. That was all about the meristematic tissues. Again, we can revise before proceeding to the permanent tissues. See, meristematic tissues, they are of the three types. First is apical, the second is intercalary, and the third is lateral. Apical, responsible for the growth of the length. Intercalary, responsible for the growth of leaves and internodes. And the lateral is responsible for the increase of the broadness or the girth of the stem or the root. Now let's proceed to the permanent tissues. First, let us discuss about the characteristics of the permanent tissues. Shape and size. How do these permanent tissues look? The cells, they have attained a shape which is definite now, and the size does not alter afterwards. Specific functions. As I have told you before, the meristematic tissues only later on form the permanent tissues, but when they have a specific function. So, the permanent cells come to have a specific function. Wall. Now, the wall of this permanent tissue can be thick also or thin also, or the thickening may be regular also or irregular also, depending upon where it is located and what is the function of the permanent tissues. Divisions. The permanent tissues, generally they do not divide. Life. These permanent tissues can be living also or they can be dead also. Now, these permanent tissues can be basically divided into two categories: the simple permanent tissues and the complex permanent tissues. First, let us start with the simple permanent tissues. These simple permanent tissues are again divided into three categories: the Parenchyma, the Collenchyma, and the Sclerenchyma. So that was a complex division. See, first, we have divided the plant tissues into two types, the meristematic and the permanent one. Meristematic divided into three parts: apical, intercalary, lateral. Permanent has been again divided into two parts, the simple and the complex. The simple one has been divided as the Parenchyma, the Collenchyma, and the Sclerenchyma. Now let's first start with the simple permanent tissues. Now, what is a parenchyma first of all? Since this is the first type of the simple permanent tissues, parenchyma or the word para means beside and enchyma is the filling. So, parenchyma is a type of tissue which is basically used for filling or the packaging of the cells. Now, they are thin-walled cells which are relatively unspecialized. Unspecialized because they have just originated from the meristematic tissues. They are isodiametric, means they have the similar diameter. They are the living cells. Regarding their shape, they can be oval also or polygonal in outline. Their cell wall, basically it has a cell wall because all the plant tissues have the cell wall, and the cell wall is made up of cellulose. Regarding their location, they are found in all the parts of the plant like the stem, root, leaves, fruits as well as the flowers. Even the mesophyll which are found in the leaves have the chloroplast which contains the parenchyma. And lastly, the cortex, the pith, the medullary rays, these are all the parts which you are going to find in the TS of the stem or the root, and they all contain the parenchymatous tissues. So basically you are going to find the parenchyma where it has to have the living part also and the filling part also. Now, if parenchyma is such an important type of tissue, what is the functions? First of all, it helps in the storage of the major things like the vacuole contains the cytoplasm which stores various important things needed for the growth of the cell. Secondly, the succulent organs. Now, the succulent organs which provides the buoyancy to the cells. Now, what these succulent organs are going to contain? They contain the mucilage as well as the water. Thirdly, it provides the support to the tissues. Now, this provides the turgidity and the rigidity to the softer parts of the plant. Next, it helps in the gaseous exchange as there are intercellular spaces in the parenchymatous tissues which helps in the movement of the gases. Next, it helps in the storage of the waste products like the tannin, resins, gums and various types of crystals which can be found in the parenchymatous tissues. Now, they help in the slow transport also. The parenchyma, when we are going to see, they are the part of the complex tissues. Thus, if they are the part of the xylem, they are helping in the movement of water. If they are the part of phloem, they will help in the movement of food. A special type of parenchyma which contains the chloroplast is known as the Sclerenchyma. This Sclerenchyma is generally found in the interior of the leaf as well as the outer cortex of the stems. Now, this helps in photosynthesis also. Another type of parenchyma known as the Erenchyma is basically found in the hydrophytes or the aquatic plants. Now, this Erenchyma, it contains a network of parenchymatous cells which encloses the air cavities. This air cavities, what they do? They store the gases and they provide the buoyancy so that the aquatic plants, they keep on floating. Also, this parenchymatous cells or the parenchyma tissue helps in the formation of the epidermis. Now, what is the epidermis? The epidermis is a specialized parenchyma which is present on the surface of the plant organs. This helps to protect the plants from the outside harsh conditions. Now, the next type of the simple permanent tissues are the Collenchyma. The word colla means glue and chyma, as I have already told you, it's the tissue. Now, what is the importance of this type of tissue? You might have seen that when there are strong winds, some plants they bend and they again regain their position. So, Collenchyma is a type of tissue or the type of permanent tissues of living cells which provides the flexibility to the soft aerial parts, the aerial parts which are above the ground, so that these parts they can bend without breaking. These Collenchyma cells, they have a thickening at the corners. Now this thickening, it is made up of the pectocellulose. I again repeat, it is a pectocellulose, a complex type of cellulose, and this pectocellulose is characteristic feature of Collenchyma. The intercellular spaces is little as compared to the parenchymatous cells. So due to the thickening, they appear oval also, they appear circular also, or they appear elongated also. Regarding their location, they are always found below the epidermis in the leaf stalks, in the midrib of the leaves, and the herbaceous dicot stem, the green dicot stem. But again, an important thing is that Collenchyma is absent in monocots. Now, the entire angiosperms have been divided into two classes, that is, the monocots and the dicots, depending upon the seed leaves they have. So, Collenchyma is always absent from the monocots, but they are present in the dicots. Now, Collenchyma is also an important type of the tissue. So, let us discuss what are the functions of Collenchyma. Firstly, it provides the strength. The Collenchyma is a living tissue which gives the mechanical strength to the cells. As I have told you, it helps in the bending of the aerial parts without the breaking. Secondly, it allows the growth and elongation of the organs. Thirdly, it helps in the storage of the tissues. It also stores certain food which is important for the plant. And lastly, Collenchyma cells may contain chloroplasts, and if they contain the chloroplasts, they help in the process of photosynthesis. So, if we discuss some of the basic differences between parenchyma and Collenchyma regarding their shape, parenchyma were isodiametric, but Collenchyma are elongated. Parenchyma wall was thin; they were not having any thickening. But the Collenchyma, they have the thickening, and the thickening is made up of pectocellulose. Thirdly, the strength. The parenchyma, it provides the turgidity to the softer organs. But the Collenchyma, it gives both mechanical strength as well as flexibility. And lastly, parenchyma is basically a packaging type of tissue. But the Collenchyma, it occurs hypodermally, means below the epidermis of the dicot stem and leaves. So that was all about the parenchyma and Collenchyma. Now let's start with the third type of permanent tissues, that is the Sclerenchyma. Now, the word scleros means hard, enchyma means tissues. These are the hard tissues which are the type of the permanent tissues. These are the simple permanent tissues, but they are dead and they have highly thick walled. The thickening is made up of lignin. Again, the thickening of Collenchyma was made up of pectocellulose. The thickening of Sclerenchyma is made up of lignin. The walls possess certain unthickened areas, and these unthickened areas are known as the pits. These Sclerenchyma tissues can be of two types, the sclereids and the fibers. They both vary depending upon the shape. Now, where does the Sclerenchyma occurs? It occurs as hypodermis in the monocot stems, because in dicot, what is present? Collenchyma. They are present around the vascular bundles. They are present inside the xylem and the phloem. They are present on the hard covering of the seeds and nuts, the husk, the brown part which you see on the coconut, the grit, the covering of the apple, pear or guava. So basically now we can understand the functions of the Sclerenchyma. First function is that it provides the mechanical strength. Due to this type of tissue only, due to the Sclerenchyma only, the plant is able to bear the various stresses of nature. Second, it provides the protection so that the seeds, the nuts, they can survive in the unfavorable conditions and they can again grow when the favorable conditions are attained. Next is the commercial fibers. The Sclerenchyma is the part of the commercial fibers also, like flax or you can say jute, the coconut, or the hemp. Now, another type of the permanent tissues are the complex permanent tissues. The complex permanent tissues are of two types, the xylem and the phloem. And both these permanent tissues are related to the transport of water and the food. Xylem is basically related to the transport of water. Phloem is related to the transport of food. Now, simple question which arises to our mind is why they are known as the complex permanent tissues. These are the permanent tissues and they are made up of more than one type of cell. See, in Parenchyma, you were having all the cells which were having the same character. Similar was the case of Collenchyma and the Sclerenchyma. But when we are going to study these types of tissues, we are going to see that they are made up of different types of cells. But combinedly, these all cells are doing a particular function in the plant body. So they are known as the tissues. The common examples are the conducting tissues or the vascular tissues, and basically of the two types as we have discussed, the xylem and the phloem. First, let us discuss about what is the xylem. The xylon is the wood. The word xylon means the wood. So, they are the permanent tissues which take part in the conduction of water and minerals. Additionally, they provide the mechanical strength also because they contain the tracheids, the fibers. So, they provide the mechanical strength to the plant also. So, xylem is also known as the wood of the plant. Now, basically, xylem consists of these four elements: the xylem fibers, tracheids, vessels, fibers as I have already told you, and the parenchyma. Now see, these are the four parts: the fibers, the parenchyma, the xylem vessels, as well as the tracheids. First, let us start with what is a tracheid. They are the long tubular dead cells with the lignified walls, and they have a wide lumen and tapering ends. See, you can see the tapered ends. You can find the tube-like cells. These are the cell walls, and they have the lignin which provides the mechanical strength. So, the various types of thickenings which are present, they provide the mechanical strength to the plant also. The water can transport from one tracheid to another through the pits. So, the pits helps in the movement of water from one tracheid to another. Now, the next element of the xylem are the vessels. Now, what are vessels? They are also the long tubes. They are formed end to end by the union of the large number of dead empty cells where the transverse walls breaks down completely. So, between the two vessels, you are not going to find any transverse walls. Secondly, the walls of the tracheids were also lignified and the vessels are also lignified. So, it is also giving a role in the mechanical strength of the plant. Since the walls are lignified, the cells are dead, so they possess the pits. Now, as I have already told you, pits are the openings or the part of the cells where the lignin deposition is not found. These vessels and tracheids, they are the conducting or the tracheary elements. So basically, these are the two types of cells or the two types of elements, you can say, of the xylem, which helps in the transport of the water. But when we compare the tracheids and the vessels are more efficient than tracheids. Now, the third type of element are the xylem fibers. They are the Sclerenchymatous fibers, which we have discussed in the Sclerenchyma also. That Sclerenchyma is of two types. So, one of them is fiber and the other one is sclereids. So, these are the Sclerenchymatous fibers which are found in the xylem, and they have the thick pitted walls, narrow lumen is the cavity, and the tapering ends. They do not have any specific role, but they only provide the mechanical strength to the plant. Next comes the Xylem Parenchyma. Now, this consists of the living cells which are present inside the xylem, and this is a very important point to be noted here, that Xylem Parenchyma is the only living element of the xylem, except that the Tracheids, the vessels and the Sclerenchyma are the dead cells or the elements of the xylem. The cells of the Xylem Parenchyma has the basic function to store food. They may also help in the slow lateral conduction or the sideways conduction of the water. So, if we discuss the functions of the xylem, first of all, it helps in the conduction of the sap. Now, we are not calling it the water because it has certain minerals also which are dissolved and which are required for the growth of the plant. So, it's been known as the sap of the plant. Secondly, as we have already studied, that it provides the mechanical strength to the plant. And thirdly, it is known as the wood because it is the hard part of the plant. Now, let us discuss with the another complex permanent tissue, that is the phloem. Now, the phloem word means inner bark. It is the complex permanent tissue which helps in the conduction of organic food inside the plant. It is a living conducting tissue as its transport channels are made up of the living cells. You are going to find that most of its elements are living. It is also known as the bast. So xylem was known as the wood, it is known as the bast. And it is made up of 4 types of elements: the sieve tubes, the companion cells, the Phloem Parenchyma and the Phloem Fibers. First, let us start with the sieve tubes. Sieve tubes are the elongated tabular living conducting tissues. Now they are formed of a large number of thin-walled sieve tube cells. The transverse end walls between these are perforated. As you can see in the figure, they are perforated or sieve-like. So that is why it is known as the sieve plate. The sieve plates are slightly bulged out on both the sides. Now, the sieve tube cells have the vacuolated cytoplasm, but the characteristic feature of the sieve tube elements is that the nucleus of these cells degenerates. The cytoplasmic strands are continuous between the adjacent cells, and the cytoplasm can pass from one cell to another through the sieve plates. Next comes a very important type of tissue which is known as a companion cell. Now students, what is a companion? Companion can be a friend. So why these type of cells are known as the companion cells? Let us discuss. Basically, when we see the structure, they are the thin-walled cells which lie on the side of the sieve tubes, and they are connected through the compound plasmodesmata. Now these plasmodesmata are the connection between the cells which have the cell wall. The cells have dense cytoplasm and a prominent nucleus. So what these companion cells does, they maintain a proper pressure gradient in the sieve tubes for the conduction. The companion cells are known as companion cells because these cells and the sieve tube cells are the sister cells and they develop from the same mother cells. Despite of having no nucleus, why sieve tubes are known as living cells? Because the companion cell controls the activity of the sieve tubes. That is why it is known as the companion cell. Now isn't that an interesting feature? Now, the Phloem Parenchyma. The Phloem Parenchyma are the thin-walled and living cells. The function is basically the storage of food and the slow lateral conduction of the food. In the Xylem Parenchyma, also it was helping in the lateral conduction of water. So, Phloem Parenchyma and Xylem Parenchyma are more or less similar in their function. Next comes the Phloem Fibers. These are the only non-living components of phloem. Next, they are thick-walled because they have the deposition of lignin. They have elongated spindle-shaped cells and they possess a very narrow lumen or the cavity. Basically, their function is to provide the mechanical strength to the phloem tissues. So now if we see the functions of the phloem helps in the conduction of the food and the phloem fibers gives the mechanical strength. Now, students, this was all about the plant tissues, but these plant tissues also combine sometimes to form some specialized types of tissues. We are going to discuss basically two types of specialized types of tissues. First is the protective tissue. Now, this protective tissue is the outer covering or the coating of the cell that covers the plant parts. It provides protection against the environmental conditions and the pathogens. Now, what are pathogens? They are the disease-causing organisms. What is the function of the protective tissue? Basically, it helps in the exchange of gases. Now, this protective tissue can be of two types, basically the epidermis and the cork. Today, we are going to discuss both of them. First, let's start with what is the epidermis. Epidermis. The word epi means upon and derma means skin. It is the outermost protective layer of the plant organs. It is single layered and the cells are elongated and very closely packed, so there are no intercellular spaces. It is found in the aerial parts and is covered with the cutin. Also, the cutin and wax forms a separate non-cellular coating which is known as the cuticle. Now, the basic function of cuticle is to protect the plant from the harsh conditions. In the grasses, the epidermal cells of the aerial parts possess the silica. Now, the specialized types of structures which are found in the epidermis are as follows. The first is the stomata. Now, you might be aware of what a stomata is. So, they are present in the aerial parts of the plant. This is the basic structure of the stomata. It contains a stomal aperture and the guard cells. So, the basic functions is that the stomata are helpful in the exchange of gases. They also help in the transpiration, that is, the loss of water in the form of vapor. The next important structure which is found on the epidermis are the trichomes. Now, these trichomes are the cutinized hairs which are present over the epidermis and they have the structure like this. And they also help in the absorption and the protection of the delicate organs. Next, specialized structure which is found on the epidermis are the root hairs which are found on the epiblema. Now, what is an epiblema? The outermost layer of the young roots is known as the epiblema, and this epiblema gives rise to the outgrowths known as the root hairs. The basic function of the root hairs is to increase the surface area so that the plant can absorb maximum nutrition from the soil. So, the functions of the epidermis are: first, it helps in the protection. Second, it helps in the water loss by the means of stomata. Third, the hair-like structures increases the surface area. Also, the stomata helps in the gaseous exchange. The epiblema is a specialized type of the epidermis which is found on the younger roots. The next type of protective tissue is the cork. Now, the cork is important because it is the outer protective covering of the stem and the roots. This cork or bark is formed by the secondary meristem and it is known as the cork cambium. Now, cambium is a type of meristematic tissues which help in the growth. This cambium is also known as the phellogen. Now, this cork cambium, it produces a secondary cortex or the phelloderm on the inner side and the phellum on the outer side. This cork cambium or the outer walls, they become dead and filled with tannin, resin or the air. The walls become impermeable due to the deposition of the suberin, so it helps in protecting the inner delicate parts of the plant. So basically, the functions of the cork is protection against the loss of water, protection against the microbes so that they cannot easily enter the plant body, insulation from the harsh conditions like heat and cold, and some of the cork also have the commercial uses like the tannin, resin, gums which were deposited in the cork. Now students, that was all about the plant tissues. The plant tissues are still simpler. In the next class we are going to study with the animal tissues and their types.